Hello, good morning Germany, good morning Central Europe, good morning, welcome back to our third day of the Beyond Festival 2020, everything online. That's why I want to say good afternoon to India, Sri Lanka, Singapore, good evening to Australia, and maybe it's good night. I hope you have a great night in the US and Southern America. My name is Kathleen, or for the German speakers, Kathleen Schröter. I'm hosting the third day of the symposium at the Beyond Festival here in Karlsruhe with the ZKM and the HFG, the Hochschule für Gestaltung, the College for Design. Here with me is today the organizer and the brain and heart behind the festival, Ludger Fanz, and he will assist me a bit with all the speakers who are dialing in from around the world. This morning we have special guests from Vienna and Singapore and America, as much as I know, but we'll see where they dial in from. It's all online and we are streaming on YouTube, Twitch, on the webpage www.beyond-filmfestival.com or beyond-festival.com. And for all of you who want to see the film festival, please don't hesitate to buy the tickets. It's only 1990 euros, so just 20 bucks. The organizers decided to make that available because we want to support the filmmakers who, most of them are documentary filmmakers who work on a shoestring budget, as they say. So we want to spread the love and not the virus, so we want to spread their work and what they have been doing around the world to spread awareness around climate change. So as you might have seen when you followed us, everything this year is around climate change, but it's also the climate of the politics, social and economic environment we are living in. So I should say a couple of words about myself. If you are a frequent visitor of the Beyond Festival, you might have seen my face. I worked the last 13 years for the prestige Fraunhofer organization, the association in Europe that is dedicated to applied science, with 27,000 people working there. So I dedicated my work and a lot of my research, so to say, around communication of science. And everything in this world is around our brain. It's basically dedicated to STEM, or as they say in Germany, MINT-Fächer. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. And as this is part the brain is the focus of the science, I have to say in the last couple of years there have been a lot of voices raising that we should have a more holistic approach to those disciplines, and we should include arts to make it not STEM but STEAM. So it's not only my view of that, it's also the view of the Beyond Festival since 2011, and I joined in 2012. I want to acknowledge a bit of what Ludger has been putting together around these years, because as science is a lot about the brain, this festival is about the heart. The heart, because that's where creativity is evolving, is getting into our brains with all these ideas that flourish. Art is influenced by numerous cultures and scientific disciplines, and of course this is our topic today. And I want to quote one of my new colleagues, because as I said, I was working for Fraunhofer. Now I changed my environment. Since this year I work for J2C, Journey to Creation in Berlin, and as they say, when a flower is not flourishing anymore, you change the environment, you don't change the flower. So I changed my environment, and as I'm as curious as Ludger is, I wanted to make that big step. So I want to quote one of my new colleagues, Habib Lisevich. He is working a lot with, and he is really, you definitely have to meet him soon. He works with shaman, and he meets a lot of indigenous tribe how do you say that, indigenous people. And he quoted one of them saying, well, you know, in your Western world, everything is around the brain. It's focusing on the brain. But in a lot of ancient cultures, it's all about the heart, because the heart pumps life into all the other organs. And that's what we are here for, to discover much more. So I also want to add one fun fact that will introduce our first speaker, who is with us on Zoom. And actually, we have two first speakers. Fun fact. Machine learning, when we talked about that the last days, neural networks are visualized as like our neural network in the human brain, which is an endless network of synapse connections. Well, under the microscope, psilocybin mushrooms, the network how our forest is connecting, looks exactly the same. And that brings me to our first speaker, who is talking about plants and the planet. But let that sink in, this fun fact. She is the first speaker of Artists for the Future, and actually she doesn't need an introduction for everybody who goes frequently to the Beyond Festival. Vibeke Sørensen, she got, the list is endless because she's working since decades in the fields of digital multimedia, animation, immersive media, interactive architectural installations, networks, visual music, performances, and she's using big data, the Internet of Things, and the Internet of Living Things. And amongst a lot of her roles, she has taught at the Californian Institute of the Arts, Princeton University, and the University of Southern California, where she founded the Division of Animation and Digital Arts called DADA. At the School of Cinematic Arts. She is a senior fellow at the San Diego Supercomputer Center, where she co-founded the Advanced Scientific Visualization Laboratory. And it's endless. I could go on, but what she's bringing today to the stage, or to you home, is a collaboration with the anthropologist and ecologist Professor Stephen Lansing, who was presenting on Thursday, I believe. So he already got his introduction. It's a 3-part multimedia installation about Bali's green revolution and living heritage, and it was exhibited at the Shire Architecture Trillions Right of Future Generations from November 2019 to February 2020. This research is providing a deeper understanding of the relationships between the calendaric systems and the natural environment, architecture, music, performance art, and several Southern Asian cultures. So you see, she's dedicated to everything that is multidisciplinary. She is a multidisciplinary approach herself. So I'd say Vibeke Sørensen and Stephen Lansing enjoy their presentation.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Great to see your face.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the invitation today. And thank you, Ludger. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Jason Stewart, who's also been helping us prepare for this remote presentation, and thanks to the audience. So let me, I have a PowerPoint or a presentation, so let me share the screen. Screen sharing seems to have been disabled. So I'll keep talking until that's working again. Host disabled attendee screen sharing. So can you hear me?
Yes.
You can. Okay. Let's see. Well, right now we're not able to share the screen, and I don't know why. So let me just, I think I remember. Well, what I was going to say is the problems that we face are so large today that we need everybody to work together. It's quite urgent, of course. And I just want to also say that even as Kathleen said, starting a long time ago, I was very concerned with technology. What's the point of it if it doesn't help us live in greater harmony with nature and other people? And so we're still trying to fix the screen sharing. I don't know why it's not working. I have our friend Nagaraju through Manapali here on my trying to solve it, and hopefully we'll be able.
Congratulations. I'm happy to hear he's with you.
Yes, he's here, and it looks like we might be almost there. Let's see. Can you see that?
Not yet. Ah, okay. The tech booth says yes. So let's
Plants
see
and
what we can.
Planet is good?
Yes, plants and the planet. Oh, I love that picture. Fantastic.
Okay, we're doing it one more time. So you should see, okay. So anyway, what I was trying to say, what, we're not sharing, he says? Now?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Who lived in harmony with nature and other people for thousands of years to help us solve the problems of survival. The potential really is at the intersection of fields and cultures where the transfer of knowledge between people and experts and the indigenous people, as you mentioned, can really be potentialized. And of course, technology has a role to play. And of course, what we need is imagination. But who's left out? Who and what are left out? And basically, you already mentioned it, Kathleen, that it's really the world's cultures. And we might also say, I would argue many of the plants are left out, including we're losing them. So what can we do about it? So actually, here you can see this wonderful slide, courtesy of Stephen Lansing. One of these networks takes in raw energy, transforms it into life, cools the earth, cleanses water, absorbs carbon dioxide, and releases oxygen, and the other does the reverse. So the problem I see with technology is it separates us often from other living things. And as you mentioned, all my career, I've tried to reverse that and develop and use technology that can bring us closer to the living world and enhance empathy. So just a little bit, Global Eyes, which I chaired for the ACM SIGGRAPH conference in 2007, really was about expanding awareness of humanity and nature. And I won't go into a lot of detail about it, just that I've been, trying to organize also institutions to address it. And instead of, projecting, if you will, our high technology into other parts of the world, the idea is it was a look back. How do we hear what people think about technology from around the world? And that's what 2007 SIGGRAPH Art Show was for. And then in 2016, at NTU, I organized the BioArt Design Symposium, Transdisciplinarity in Art, Science, and Creativity, to focus education, design, and art on environmental problems and sustainability. And one of our speakers today, Victoria Vesna, gave the keynote for that, and Galina gave a talk there too. And then we founded the ADM Loom Lab, Laboratory of Open Matters, which focused on biological art and design, ecology and art, wearable technologies, smart textiles, and explorations and collaborations where sustainability was at the focus. And Galina mentioned this yesterday. These are our founders. And really, the idea is that, in a way, it's not only bio, but bio is the new media. We're a media art school, and so this was very important as to bring this in. Some of the various areas includes transmedia, across cultures and life forms, visualization, sonification, what we might call sensory translation, or many different kinds of sensors, what I call the rematerialization of media, not just the dematerialization, although there's a huge space in between, and that's part of our exploration. Of course, ecology and art, genomics, working with materials science, art and design, and new programs, and design, heritage, and science, and medicine. We're doing quite a lot with medical applications. Finally, really what it is it's a kind of global climate activism. If you basically, if you don't like what you see, you either accept it the way it is or you change it. And I think I'm so happy so many young people around the world are already, in a movement about this. And it's great also, as I was head of the school here until a year ago, to have been able to foster some of that in Singapore. So just quickly, basically the significance of green plants is so important because of their unique relationship with humans, not to mention, of course, all other living things. When we talk about green plants, we talk about photosynthesis, which provides energy from the sun and for the earth biosphere and humankind. So I know most of you know all this, so I won't go into it, what happens and why it's so important. Let me just say that in the arts and design, of course, we think about photosynthesis and biological concepts that are reflected in new ways of thinking about design, including biomimicry, and plant art installations, plant communication, of course, plants in eco-art and eco-design, and a huge area of eco-architecture and urban design, and collaboration with experts and people in the field such as anthropology, agriculture, and governments. This is the part of the activism I'm talking about. So, when eco-artists are responding to the global challenge, we think about crossing borders to inspire ecological sensibility and conservation, borders of all kinds, national, political, and of course, geographical and cultural. So we involve artworks within the natural landscapes, among other things, and links to the land, of course, and thinking about our position in the ecological system, not as the center, but really as an agent, and in a way, we're so dependent on the ecology around us. And with that knowledge, rethinking what we can do to improve things for the rest of all of the planet and living things. Create public awareness and bring the idea of how nature can be reintroduced into urban centers, which many people are already doing. Just a brief, this has been going on for quite a while. Gradually in the arts, Telegarden by Ken Goldberg is he's an important pioneer. Cyber Gardening, that was exhibited at Linz in Austria in 2004. It's an art installation that allows web users to view and interact with a remote garden filled with living plants. And the center is a robot controlled by remote operators to create and maintain a communal garden. So that's a key one. And Eduardo Kac created this work called Natural History of the Enigma between 203 and 208. He created a plantimal, plant and animal, a new life form that's a genetically engineered flower that's a hybrid of him and a petunia. The gene was isolated from the artist's blood cells and inserted into the petunia's genome, expressing the artist's DNA exclusively in the red veins of the flower. So the result's a bloom that creates the living image of human blood rushing through the veins of the flower. So his idea is that it's a reflection of the contiguity of life between different species. And then this is by Heather Ackroyd and Dan Harvey in 2011, Photosynthesis Testament. And basically the idea is that it utilizes grass grown from seeds on a vertical surface, and the image to be printed, so to speak, is projected on the grass lawn. And depending on the intensity of the light, the production of the chlorophyll creates tonal ranges of black and white photographic paper equivalent to the grass shades of yellow and green. So that's another interesting hybrid work, just to give you a little background. And then San van Aken, whose work is a marriage of art and nature. He uses grafting to combine more than 40 different kinds of stone fruit, ranging from cherries and plums to peaches, apricots, and almonds. So the biological basis is the manipulation of tissues of different plant species, through, as I mentioned, through grafting in a non-sexual manner. And ultimately, it's a symbiosis of humankind's relation to nature. I want to point out somebody else who was here when I first came to Singapore, Lucy Davis, who's now in Aalto University in Finland. She's a visual artist, writer, and founder of the Migrant Ecologies Project. And her work is focused on ecologies, animal and plant studies, art and visual culture, and materiality and memory. And what she did was she was tracking endangered wood from Southeast Asia, and and she was working with companies here that would allow her to do that, to find out where is it going and what's happened, and then going back and looking at not just the stories of the trees, but the loss of habitat that sustained them. Very important work. And I'm sorry she's not with us anymore, but she's with us all in a way. So Lucy Davis, and people you probably know, Philip Beasley, and the Living Architecture Systems group. And this was a show he had here at ADM, working with, well, I should just say he's an interdisciplinary design company in Toronto that specializes in architectural design for public buildings, public art, and experimental installations. And he works with, that's right, the Living Architecture Systems Group at the School of Architecture and Faculty of Engineering at the University of Waterloo, and Riverside Architectural Press. And his work has been going on for decades, and it's focused on immersive textile environments, landscape installations, and geometric structures. And you can see that it's very much involved with biomimicry. So I just want to mention also a bit of biomimicry. I've been collaborating with Alexander Melkozunov, and we've been very inspired by beautiful photosynthetic structures. And all of these contain chlorophyll. And we worked together in 2012 to take a message, basically it's called Message to Nature, and it's coded into the sequence of a protein which takes the shape of one of the plant antenna proteins that captures photons of light and transfers them to reaction centers. So what I wrote was a motto: Genesis is life and creativity, science and art dreaming. And it was, as I mentioned, translated into the protein code with his help. So this kind of collaboration, you can imagine, it's a conceptual piece. It actually was done on the computer, but we don't really want to interfere too much with the genomes of the plants at this point. It's a message, it's a conceptual piece. So also we want to talk about, can plants produce sounds? In bioacoustics, it's been confirmed that plants can produce sounds. And the acoustic instrumentation that allowed scientists to record clicking sounds from roots of corn saplings that were transmitted to soil through the soil were actually picked up. I think it's University of British Columbia where they're doing that work. Let me go on. But the idea of using technology to takes data from nature goes back at least as early as 1933 by the Italian futurists Marinetta and Masnata, when they proposed the reception, amplification, and transformation of vibrations emitted by living beings of states of mind. And in 1974, Manfred Eaton wrote a book about taking signals from life and using it for music. So indeed, there have been quite a few composers, such as Richard Teitelbaum and David Rosenblum, who have been using EEGs and ECG signals. So it's been around for a while. It's getting more popular. And Chris Chafe, a Stanford professor, recently made a beautiful work that you can find online called 1200 Years of Climate Change, where we can listen at sonification of the climate change. It's very dramatic. I'm not going to play it for you, but I'm sure you can imagine with those things. And then we have the climate dress, which also influenced many of us and our lab. And it's by Diffuse, a Copenhagen-based design studio specializing in smart materials, soft hardware, and poetic technology. And this one won an award, the Samsung Award. And basically what it does, I have to turn on the lights again? Okay. It's made of conductive embroidery, over 100 tiny LED lights, a CO2 sensor, and an Arduino lily pad. And it's basically to visualize the carbon dioxide in the nearby surroundings. So to let you know how safe it is. Okay, for symphony, Ryuichi Sakamoto, a Japanese musician who was inspired by photosynthesis, created an art installation called the Forest Symphony in 2013, and it features specially developed biopotential sensors, and the signals detected are transmitted, amplified, and turned into sound. And so the sensors from around the world send changing sounds of forests to Japan, which is very beautiful and also has an influence on myself and many other people. So on myself, just quickly, people who know me already know about illuminations. It's a 30-meter wide illuminated folding screen where the plants, there's a canopy of plants, and their O2 and CO2 was detected in a biofeedback system. And the plants' biorhythms were translated into music, and they sang melodies that affected changes in the images, colors, and moving shapes. That affected their growth, as it turns out. I was told they would die, but actually they flowered. And the only time that they started getting unhappy really was after they were out of the installation. So, and so here's a couple of moments from that work. It was also installed at ZKM as a hanging work in 3D a few years ago. But here's the plant interaction using pure data and graphics. So we were able to actually listen to them. The entire piece was inspired by this Tibetan medicine mandala. And I won't go into all that. In Sanctuary in the early 2000s, embedded systems used capacitance and touch to activate elements in also a responsive environment. And basically, the plants, right now the light's turned off, but there are plants in there that when people were touched, it went through as a reverse tree structure into the dirt to the bottom, and that we could detect what was happening with the plants. Not just touch, but of course, other aspects in a biofeedback loop. And the piece by itself was dreaming, as I say. It was the moments of let me go back, the moments of the state of the plants. And the images were spiritual natural sanctuaries around the world. Okay, Morocco memory, I worked with seeds, collective memory, collective databases, navigation. I'm not going to talk about that because I'm going to run out of time. And then Mood of the Planet is big data, where we used basically, well, it was inspired by Tiwanaku, which is an archaeological site in Bolivia. And what we did was make a light-emitting sculpture based on it. And it has 30 screens and real-time big data from networks such as Twitter, looking at the emotions of people around the world. Today, it would be all about COVID. But it's laid out as an idea as it represents transformation from one step to the other as you enter, like a temple. And then when you enter into the inside, there's mirrors that reflect, and you see an endless tunnel that is collapsed into the present. And it was made, of course, with Naga's help. Here's just some images from it, which we'll move on to. And digital amulet, that was too heavy, so now I think it should be lighter, where you should be able to put it in your carry-on bag, but we don't travel so much right now. But still, the idea is more that, we need to connect our bodies to our environment. And I use the idea of the Egyptian collar to design something that has heart sensors, temperature, humidity. Naga helped, of course. with this and connected to the internet and could bring us into a kind of dialogue, a presence in the network, the natural network. So these are different. Another Worlds was shown at Beyond a couple years ago, and it's an inversion of virtual reality, which I find limiting in its ability to engage nature. It's much, much better with access to, sensors and visualization. And that's because of artists and visionaries and scientists developing it. In this piece, as I say, it is more of an inversion, taking computational dynamic data and rematerializing it. And uses online data from 5 biomes, the dry desert, tropics, Arctic, savanna, rainforest, and looks at air temperature and wind speed and displays it on 6 layers. At Beyond, we had 2, because they're really big, difficult to move. But really, it's a kind of poetic, representation of this. Here you see the exhibit, which was huge, and I was very excited to show it there. And I'm grateful for the opportunity. Here are the color codes of the LEDs that were embedded. And it was online, you could track what we were looking at. So, and last year I talked about color music of the plants of the planet. So it's more than that. Color music is a term for this. It's really the synthesis of our sense-based media and big data and distributed processing. But more than that, what does it mean in our ecosystem? As I say, at this point in time, what can we do with it to really help solve these problems? I think the artists are, ready. I'm certainly ready to be working with anthropologists and ecologists as ecologists ourselves, our own kind of ecologists, on really, working to help what's disappearing. And at this point, to be not too, it's not just disappearing, we're saving it, we're going to save it. So I'm going to hand over to Steve Lansing, who's going to talk about that. Steve?
Okay.
So.
Right, so I married Vivica 2 years ago. It's like living under a waterfall of ideas. And I'm just an anthropologist. So I've worked for many years now in Southeast Asia, and I'm going to talk very briefly, because I think we're kind of running out of time, about 2 of the projects that I've tried to interest her in. So I'll say just a word about why the tropics matter. This is my pitch. So lessons from the Ice Age. They contain 80% of the terrestrial biodiversity, and actually something like that in the marine. 95% of coral reefs. And they survived the Pleistocene, during which time vast regions of the planet were frequently buried under ice. So what we know is the tropics really matter. This is the place that matters for the health of the planet. They're the final refuge for biodiversity. So I'm going to talk a little bit about 2 places we've been working, Borneo and Bali, starting with Borneo. That's Borneo, where the tropical forests have been disappearing at a colossal rate since the 1950. About more than half of them are gone. And Borneo has the highest terrestrial biodiversity. That's a picture of the remaining forest in the upland regions left in 2017. So that's very grim. And we find, I'm working with hunters and gatherers and their ancestors, and we've just worked out through genetic research, have been there since, well, at least 40,000 years ago, and we've just found that the ones that we've been looking at can trace their ancestry back. There's tens of thousands of years. So you'll meet them in just a moment, because that's what happened to us. We did. We thought that all of the former hunter-gatherers had become sedentary, had moved into villages, settled down. But then it turned out that in a remote region, we were introduced to some cave-dwelling Hunan, they call it, hunter-gatherers, who are still living in their forests in the traditional way, trading for rice and some modern goods, like used clothing, sometimes also wearing their own clothing made out of bark. So here are the Punan. They've been there forever, and they move around a network of caves in the forests, playing nose flute sometimes. Here's a Punan woman wearing the traditional bark cloth. The thing about the bark cloth is it's hard to make and it's hard to maintain, so it's easier just to get a t-shirt anymore, but they still wear them in the forests. Okay. So these are the tracks of Punan people in their forests in this rather remote region of Borneo. They're wearing belts, which Viveka and Galina, our colleague, created, carrying GPS and actigraph units so as to figure out where they are. And you might notice that some of that looks nice and green and dark. So that's the intact forest, but you can also see the encroaching oil palm areas and logging. So here are a couple of the Punan in their t-shirts, but wearing their actigraphs, which they willingly did because it enabled us to track their relationship to the forest. The dots in those two maps show you on the left map, the oil palm areas. So you can see they're already losing some of their land to the oil palms. And on the right, the logging concessions. So we've just managed to persuade the Nature Conservancy and the Leakey Foundation to work together to create a conservation plan to make it possible for the cave Punan to survive in their forests. That's what they've asked us to do. On the right, you see a stick language signal. They send signals to one another in the forest, offering to share food, offering and giving warnings about things like diseases. So all that still exists. And what we're preparing now, what Viveka is creating, is a silk scarf. You can see it there with that image, which will be available to the donors to this campaign from the Nature Conservancy, because it shows what we're trying to protect, the heartland region of the Cave Punan, and the reason why. This is the land, you can see that's where they move on it, and that's what needs to be protected, or as they say, their children will starve. Okay, I'll just keep talking to say, this is a tree dress. Viveka was rather inspired by the way the Punan were making use of their trees, so she created music in the tree dress. And that is a way of showing, connecting, getting a connection for us to think about what is our relationship to nature? What's our relationship to the forest? What's our relationship to the trees? So this sort of dramatizes it. And then Viveka's gotten quite interested in Balinese gamelan music, so you're listening to one of her pieces, which she calls Forest. So we have a sensor in the ground to follow the tree here in Singapore, which is wrapped around Viveka. The environment and the condition are represented in the dress as those moving lights. And there we are, there's the sensor. Thanks to Naga for making it actually work. Okay, and here's some of Viveka's more recent art. She decided that the forests are very beautiful, but she thought they might need a little brightening up. So here are the forests reimagined by Viveka for dresses and for all kinds of things. So that's the Borneo story in brief. Have I got 4 more minutes? Well, unless someone stops me, I'll just plow ahead. Here's Bali, here's another story. This is for the Bali Climate and Rice Campaign. Ancient rice terraces, at least 1,000 years old in Bali, but the trouble with rice is that wet rice is one of the major causes of greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, the flooded rice paddies emit lots of greenhouse gases. The highest greenhouse gas emission of the major food crops. Unfortunately, we can't just stop growing rice because it's the most important food crop for low and middle income societies. So here you can see these beautiful terraces, but there are also enormous sources of both methane and nitrous oxide. Indonesia has actually over 12 million hectares of rice, so it turns out that it's a lot of methane. Something needs to be done, but stopping is not the answer. So recently, long story, we found a way by measuring a long story, we can reduce those greenhouse gas emissions by 2/3 and also wonderfully increase grain yields by about 22%. This is just now. We're about to finish, the paper's just about to be out. The trouble is greenhouse gases are invisible. So Viveka had the idea of sonifying the data that we get from the gas emission machine for the Indonesian media, in other words, television, so as to show the farmers what they can do for the planet. They can grow a little more rice with this system, and they can also reduce greenhouse gases. So she sonified it, and she used gamelan music because it's a way of making the connection, right, to the farmers, what they do, and what their world is, what their music is. So here's what it sounds like. Okay, so that very alarming sequence is methane, lots and lots of methane. Nitrous oxide is actually 300 times more damaging to the atmosphere than carbon dioxide, and there's been a lot of controversy about how much nitrous oxide is being emitted by the rice paddies, but it turns out that irrigation management can reduce those levels to near zero. So controlling nitrous oxide is a very big deal. So instead of just publishing a paper about it, we're using, well, with Viveka's ideas, her sonified nitrous oxide emissions to make that difference. In other words, the difference is harmless nitrous oxide, near zero, make that perceptible to the farmers. This is what that sounds like as gamelan music. Yeah, not so bad, under control. So I'm just going to press on because we're a bit, I'm sure we're out of time, so I'll just wind up and say the idea is to use this gamelan music to tell the story of the rice emissions, the sonification, not just for Western audiences, but also on Indonesian TV, which frequently has agricultural shows, to explain to people how this works. And so we can tell the farmers that they can adapt their irrigation methods to increase grain, but they can also improve the climate of the planet. And I'm sure they'll do it. So that's our story. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Viveka. Thank you for showing us your way, how you got inspired to what you're doing right now. And I really like the last sentence that you said, Steve. It's not just publishing papers. We should do something about it. It's great to see that the TV shows what you are doing and that this is going out to farmers and that actually all in the public who can receive public television can see that. Thank you. We will talk with you later at the panel. See you soon. And I will have a couple of more panelists now who will introduce themselves and their work. And then we will discuss with you. I guess you're in Singapore, right?
Yes, we are.
Yes, fantastic. Oh, stay with us. Hear you soon. Thank you. So I'd say I present our next speaker, Elizabeth. Oh, I hope I pronounce that correctly. Wanjiru Watuti. She is a Kenyan environment and climate activist. And she's the founder of the Green Generation Initiative, which nurtures young people to love nature and to be environmentally conscious in a young age, and has now planted 30,000 tree seedlings in Kenya. In 2019, she was awarded the African Green Person of the Year award by the 111112 Foundation and named as one of the 100 most influential young Africans by the African Youth Awards. I can tell you more and more, but I want to give her the time to present, and I hope she's already with us. Fantastic, because she's one of the most enthusiastic about sustainability, and that brought her where she is today. So please, there she is, Elizabeth. This is your time.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Watuti. I'm an environment and climate activist from Kenya, and also the founder of an initiative called Green Generation Initiative that nurtures young people to love nature and be conscious of the environment when they are young, and I'll be sharing more about that throughout my presentation. And I'm also the head of campaigns at Wangari Maathai Foundation and a coordinator of Daima Consortium on Green Spaces here in Kenya. And I'd love to begin by sharing my story through this video. And I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, here's my story.
We have a bit of delay. We can't hear it. Maybe you can talk over it. We see the pictures, but we can't hear the sounds sometimes with the internet connection. I guess you're sitting in Kenya right now. Can you hear me? Yes, maybe you just talk over it. That sometimes happens.
Okay, so I don't know if you could hear the sound,
No.
or maybe I was, no, I'm not muted. Okay. Yeah, so let me just talk over it as it runs. I think that'll be great. Yeah. Yeah. So this is just a view of Nairobi, and that was on Friday as we were doing the Fridays for Future climate strike. So I grew up in Nyeri County, and it's a region that's famous for its beautiful forests here in Kenya. And basically my passion was as a result of being able to connect to nature at a young age and just growing up in this beautiful place that was full of forest and the beautiful trees. And you can see how that has been able to inspire me to begin this initiative and to pass on the same passion and love for the environment to other young children. So I was inspired by the late Professor Wangari Maathai. And at that particular time, she was the Member of Parliament for my home region. So nature has always been my best teacher. And that is why today I feel the pain of nature caused by environmental degradation. And you can see some views of environmental injustices that happen every day. These are things that broke my heart even when I was a teenager. And every time I read about how fast the wild forests were burning down and being destroyed, and the lakes and rivers becoming a soup of poison flowing with plastic wastes, and even seeing children in different parts of the world struggling to breathe and being forced to wear pollution masks just to go to school. All these things disturbed me and just broke my heart, and that's why I decided to be a voice of change. And that's how I founded Green Generation Initiative in 2016 to now nurture children and more young people to love nature and be conscious of environment at a young age. So I'll be talking about it throughout the conversation, and you can see a clip of the children being able to get a few tree seedlings to grow. So this campaign is dubbed Adopt a Tree campaign, and I will share with you more about it as well throughout the presentation.
Unfortunately, we can't hear the sound. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll just share briefly. So I made that video to just share my story and just let people know how I became an activist and how I became an environmentalist as well. It's a childhood story that is basically because of how I got to connect to the environment and to connect to the forest landscape when I was still a little girl. And mostly because I grew up in the most forested region here in Kenya. It's called Nyeri County, and it's famous for its beautiful forest, and it's also famous for being the birthplace to my greatest source of inspiration, the late Professor Wangari Maathai. And when I was growing up, she was the member of parliament in my home region, and she was mobilizing women and uh, mobilizing the women to start up tree nurseries and to also grow trees around their home compounds and around different institutions, because she had realized that they had to walk for long distances to look for water, to look for firewood, and to even look for food to feed their families. And so she needed to have to empower them more to get some source of income for themselves, and also to empower them more to also be able to address environmental degradation. And she inspired me greatly to also begin an initiative to empower more young people to love nature and be conscious of the environment at a young age. I personally got a chance to plant my first tree when I was only 7 years old, and it's a memory that still lives on till date, because it made me get this strong connection to the natural world, which I believe is the key to being part of the solution to environmental degradation. Because unless we get a strong connection to the natural world as the entire human race, then we will still continue to be at war with nature, and we will not be recognizing the fact that nature is our home, and the fact that we depend on nature for our very own survival. And that is why we should not be at war with nature. So for me as a child, just being able to watch or read about how the wild forests were being destroyed or burned down at alarming rates, and seeing different videos and reading about how the oceans, the rivers, the breaks, and all these waterways becoming what I like to call a soup of poison, flowing with plastic waste because of human activities, are things that devastated me so much and made me feel a deep anger and the need to want to do something about it. And I know the reason why I felt devastated was because I had this strong connection to the natural world. And so I didn't want anything wrong to happen to nature, anything wrong to happen to the natural world, because that is what I have always known as home. All my memories as a child was running in the forest and just staying close to the riverbanks, watching the clean streams flowing. And so when I see these colors of our waterways are now changing, they're flowing with plastic. We are killing our animals, our marine, and just destroying our forests and everything that we should be calling home and everything that is home right now. That makes me feel that it's about time that the entire human race takes a turn around and decides to treat nature as it should be treated, because we are not treating her right. And so this particular initiative was to get the same natural call to action to the young people and to the children, because this is their future. And we have to ensure that we are having them as part of the solution. And we have to also let them know what is happening, open up their eyes to see how the world is changing right now, and how they can be part of the solution, and how they can also voice out to secure their future, because it's at risk. And so one of the most interesting activities that we decided to do throughout this initiative was to practically enlighten them about all these challenges that were breaking my heart, all these challenges that I saw and made me feel so devastated about how the future was going to look like. And these kids, they want to learn. They have faced all these challenges that come as a result of the climate crisis, food insecurity, floods, and all these challenges that come as a result of increasing and also unpredictable weather patterns that we are facing right now. And one of the most interesting things is that they want to be part of the solution. And I remember one time when I walked with some children close to a stream in the city that was so much polluted. And my main reason was to just walk them there to see that indeed our waterways are turning into what we wouldn't want to see in the next coming years, and they're turning into what will be a risk to everyone's future. And I remember one question that the kids asked me was when they saw how the stream was looking like, it was brown in color and full of trash, and they would see some pipes that were releasing waste into that same river, and they would also feel this, they would smell the bad smell that was coming from the whole place. And they were so sad, and they asked me, who did this and what can we do about it? So this shows you that as much as the kids are young, there's no one who is too young or too small to make a difference. As long as we empower them and inspire them to know what they are able to do. And so what we do is practically involve them and train them on environmental education, because we want them to understand these issues. We want them to understand the deeper meaning of these issues. And we also want them to know that it's all is not lost. We want them to know that they can also be part of the solution. And so one of the other program that we started was a campaign that I dubbed Adopt a Tree campaign. And because I realized that a lot of trees were being planted all over the world, but people did not care to understand how that tree would survive up to maturity. Millions of trees and even up to date are still being planted all over the world. But I always keep asking, the biggest question is, how many of these trees get to grow and mature? How many of these trees get to grow and get up to maturity? Because a tree is life. And for me, having connected most of the forest landscape, I know that a tree is life. And for that tree to survive, it needs to be nurtured, just as we human beings nurture ourselves to be able to grow and, have life. And so this particular campaign was not only to help increase the forest cover, it was also to get these children to connect to nature, because each child gets a chance to plant and adopt a tree each in their school compound. And we want to inspire them to be the change makers. We want to inspire them to be able to have that natural call to action to also help secure our natural resources, because they are under threat. And by the time these children grow to probably the age of 20, the age of 30, if we don't do something right now, it means that we are risking their very own future. And so I like when I see the excitement in them when they are growing these trees. And what they do is they take care of that tree up to maturity. And most of them, even as they are done with their school, they are able to go back to their schools and see how they were able to grow a small seedling into a huge tree. And it's a great source of inspiration because they are able to now impact others to also contribute to helping nature help us. And this particular campaign so far, we have been able to plant over 30,000 tree seedlings, because we focus on making sure that every child in every school gets that opportunity. And the other thing that we do is we also green and beautify the schools. Most of the schools right now have challenges, and especially the public schools. And one of the challenges would be the fact that when the kids look outside, they probably don't see anything that can connect them and link them back to nature. Possibly because the school compound maybe has got no trees, or the school compound has maybe even got no grass. So what we do is we change and transform the face of that school and make sure that if it's for the fence, for example, the fence that you see for this particular school, those trees that the kids were holding were planted along the fence. And it's to just have that shield and that fence that blocks the school as well from the outside noise and uh, the outside disruptions that you can see. And once we do that, we also make sure that now these kids can be able to have a learning environment that is conducive for them, because this is one of the things that nature contributes and brings to them. And you also know that green spaces and just the fact that just the aspect of having nature around also contributes to how the kids get to grow even mentally, and how they get to even concentrate and just develop as a child. And so we need these spaces for them. We need to create this particular environment for them, and we cannot afford to risk their future by being at war with nature. And I know that nature-based solutions are things that we cannot afford to ignore when it comes to addressing the impacts of the climate crisis. And we need to empower the communities, we need to empower the children, we need to empower the young people to be able to focus on these nature-based solutions, because our solutions are still at the end of the day going to be back to nature. Because the reason why we are facing most of the challenges today is because we have, I mean, the human race has been at war with nature for a very long time. And so the only way we are going to be able to address these challenges is to turn back to nature and reimagine a different connection and reimagine a kind of different relationship with our natural world if we want nature to help us. And the other thing was also making sure that we address the challenge of food insecurity. In Africa, food insecurity is one of the greatest impact that has come as a result of the climate crisis. And I would say it has affected the children and the women at a huge perspective, because just going a day without food for a child is not something you can compare to an adult. And also, on the other hand, for the women, the other ones that have to also like walk for long distances to either look for water or look for food to feed their families. And so one of the solutions that we decided to come up with through this initiative is how we can be able to now use this tree growing culture to be able to have something nutritious for the kids to feed, at least during the school time. And we decided to start establishing food forests. And by food forest, I mean we focus on planting mixed types of fruit trees in designated corners of the school compounds. And these mixed fruit trees are also nurtured by the same children. And what happens is that once the fruits are grown, the kids are able to have something nutritious for them to feed on, at least a fruit a day. And this for us is just making sure that we are addressing this challenge and solving different challenges using one solution at the same time. Because as much as we are increasing the forest cover, training the kids to be passionate and to also be able to have that natural call to action to be able to address these challenges, then we are also helping address food insecurity through this particular campaign of establishing food forests in the school compound. And the progress has been great so far, and we've been able to cut across over 35 schools right now in Kenya. And that impact is means that we have also impacted over 20,000 school children so far. And our vision is to, of course, cut across all the 47 counties in Kenya, because right now we've been able to focus on 7 counties. And one of the approach I use is the university students are the ones that are joining the initiative as volunteers, because I started this when I was still in campus. And what they do is they help impact the same knowledge and passion that they have to the young children. And so the volunteer capacity right now is at 40 young people. And these are passionate young people. Most of them are university students. And they are able to also, in a way, adopt a school each, such that where they are back in their homes and back in their counties, they can also be able to go back to that particular county, and they can also be able to go back to a particular school, train the children, and check on how our program is making a difference in their lives, and also check on how this particular project is also impacting the communities. And the next phase of this project is to start up tree nurseries in different schools, in different counties, because we also believe that we can produce our own tree seedlings, because sometimes the tree seedlings will be very expensive. So if you have a school population of about 1,000 kids and you need to have a tree each for them to adopt, then it means that you need to buy 1,000 tree seedlings. And normally, especially for the fruit trees, they become very expensive. And so if we can have the capacity of being able to produce our own tree seedlings, then that is the kind of vision that we are looking up to, because we want to inspire more, we want to impact more schools, and we want to possibly reach all the schools in Kenya, and after that expand to the other borders. And I would say that the approach of involving the young children and the young people is something that would be a key solution as well to the climate crisis, and listening to the young people and making sure that we are also working with them and involving them to be part of the process. Because we have been born into a mess that we definitely did not create, but we cannot afford to continue being in a world that's not livable and risking to have a future that is not secure. So that is why having the young people and the children as part of the solution, and number one, listening to them and making sure that we are, of course, like acting up to their demands, it's something that would really help when it comes to addressing the impacts of the climate crisis. Because for me, I will tell you, it is not a future concern anymore. All these challenges are happening, and the figures that we see every day of people that we are losing, and the livelihoods, and people getting displaced every day due to all these challenges that are as a result of the climate crisis, is not a future concern for us. It's happening, it's real, and we are losing people. We are losing People are losing their livelihoods, and it's definitely not something that we would want to keep risking, because every moment that we fail to take urgent action, then we keep losing more people and risking the lives of more children, more young people, the lives of more communities that are vulnerable to the impacts of this crisis. So it doesn't mean that if you don't see the impacts from where you are, it doesn't mean that they do not exist. They are happening, and there are people that are experiencing them at the center, and it's been really difficult. And for example, for I would say that this year has not been easy because of the things that I have been seeing, and all the from the news of different data and statistics of people that we've had to lose due to the unpredictable and heavy erratic rainfall we've had for this particular year. And remember, this comes after a prolonged drought that had happened, and a lot of people, of course, had to depend on food aid, and at the same time had to lose their lives. And it's not something that I personally want for my future. It's not something that I want to happen to anyone. And that is why everyone needs to care. Everyone needs to be part of the solution. And I'll tell you for a fact that despite the fact that there are all these challenges, and the fact that, for example, Africa is at the center of the impacts of the climate crisis, there are so many solutions that are happening right now in the African continent. So many young people, so many children, so many women groups, and so many people are teaming up to be able to address this crisis, because we cannot afford to wait for everyone to take action. So it's just an eye opener that despite the fact that we are at the center of these challenges, we are still, there's that resilience, and there's also that particular uh, community minded Africa, where people are teaming up to be able to also address these challenges, and mostly focusing on nature based solutions. And due to the fact that right now the African continent contributes to less than 5% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, but stands to be the most affected by the impacts of this crisis. But then people are still waking up, people are still coming up with solutions to be able to help their communities adapt to the impacts of this crisis, because we cannot afford to continue having all this loss and damage as a result of the climate crisis and just hold back our hands and say that we will wait for other people to take action. I believe that the climate crisis should be addressed by each and every person, and each and every country, each and every leader out there. And it's up to each and every person to take their fair share and do what is expected of them. Because
Yeah.
the fact that there are those that don't do what is expected of them is what is actually making us not get to where we want to be. So I do believe everyone can be a part of the solution, And as young people, we are action, and everything that we need to be doing right now is taking action and also demanding for urgent action from our
Yeah.
world leaders and everyone else.
This
Thank you very much.
This is, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. I can only say you are a hero because you are, from my point of view, the next generation, and you are teaching the generation that comes after you. And you are the example for the saying, lead by example. Thank you so much for your input and for the work that you are doing there in Kenya. We will come back to you with the panel, but I have to continue, unfortunately. So because we have 3 more speakers that will be included in the panels. So let's continue with Raza Smita. She's an international acknowledged artist and cultural innovator. She's already there with you, so you can meet online. At least I see both of you right now. So she's working in the intersection of art, science, and emerging media since the mid-90s. She's the founder of the RIX, or RIXZ Z Center, no, sorry, ABC C Center for New Media Culture in Riga, and the curator of the annual RIX Art Science Festival, a pioneer for internet radio, and she's bringing her artwork today to us. One of the more recent artwork, such as Talk to Me, human-plant communication projects, as we just heard a lot about the plants and how important they are. And the biotricity, or you will tell us how to pronounce it, the sonic experiment series with bacteria electricity. That has been shown at Ars Electronica, the ZKM here, the MIT, and the Vienna Biennale, and the Futurium in Berlin. I would say I give you the minutes that you need, and I will be silent now, and you talk. Raza?
Because I'm now from RIX Art Science Center's field residency, which is in Riga based in Latvia. Hello? It's fine. So where I'm carrying out our research project on the forest, which is the most new project, which I would like to introduce here. So I will share the screen. So it's, do you see?
We can see it, or at least right now we see something black. Should be your screen.
Okay, so EcoData project is a project which I started in
Maybe you can, Raza, can you click one more? There is still the first page that is black.
So it doesn't work properly yet.
Well, I get a thumbs up from the tech booth that it is there, but maybe you try it again. So now I see poetics. Okay. Go back to share screen on the Zoom button down there. Maybe then it should work. Otherwise, I give an introduction further to what you want to show us. I guess it's about the creation of immersive environment. And
That is sharing is paused. Why?
try it one more time to click on the button share screen.
No, it says that sharing. Why it is paused? Okay, just.
Otherwise, the tech booth specialists are looking for your presentation that we can just do it from here, because obviously we have a backup and a backup plan and a backup of a backup. So I couldn't hear him, but let's see.
If you click on
Raza, if you click
on full screen, then it doesn't work. Don't click on full screen when you start your presentation.
Okay, so first full screen.
Not full screen.
Not full screen.
Okay, not full screen. Okay.
Just
so
go,
then-
like, be in your presentation on where you see all the different slides, and then you click on
And start presentation. Start presentation.
start presentation.
Do you see now?
Yes, thumbs up.
Yeah, it works.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so I start again. So I would like to introduce, do you see next slide, just for checking? So
Yes.
I would like, yeah. Okay, so I would like to introduce you with my more recent project about the forest and its relation to the atmosphere and all the complexity actually which I found out during my research. So it was a project Ecodata, Ecomedia, Ecoaesthetics, funded by Swiss National Science Foundation and carried out by the Institute of Aesthetic Practice in Basel. And the special site in which this research took place was Finnwald Forest in Swiss Alps, where due the drought, which is very hardly affected by drought. And so the scientists there have been turned this facility, like the forest, into a whole living observatory where they are observing tree species, environmental, climate, and emissions, and soil, humidity, and different other conditions. So they also have divided all this area into different zones. So they are also carrying out their irrigation efforts. So there are some parts which they are watering with enough, powering enough humidity for the soil, and then the rest of the areas are left dry. So which kind of are like, because they are also modulating the future effects of the drought, because it's getting more and more dry and climate. So I was particularly interested in the remote sensing technologies, also and working with the data, with data visualization, using scientific data and my own. So I was using, for example, near-infrared camera, because I'm also always in my artistic practice, I'm interested to show the invisible processes in the nature, and near-infrared spectrum is that part which the plants are reflecting back. So because of the photosynthesis process, so this part is reflected very heavily back, but we don't see it with our eyes. But if we have these special near-infrared spectrum modified cameras, which also are used widely in science and in farming, so then we can also more test and see the health status of the trees, forests, or even much larger areas if they are used on the drains, airplanes, or even from the satellites. And then the other technology I wanted to use was this LiDAR scanner, because it is also, there are some specific qualities which you can observe just by having those laser data. But I was more interested in capturing this specific environment and try to combine with the living processes. And also, by my surprise, when visiting this area, I always, when I come back from this Finnwald forest, on the other side are these rather old school, like 70s, like first or second generation satellites, big site, which was former military, and so signal horn, but it's mainly communication satellites these days. They are not anymore military, more commercial purpose. But they always reminded me my interest, because for many years I was working with electromagnetic waves as a medium and material in arts, and so I was trying to find out my point in this forest research, which goes beyond like terrestrial level, so which connects atmospheric level as well. So I was for a long time discussing with my team. So we were discussing what are signals, what is the emission, and so which way to go. So I wanted to, because I went to forest once and I met the scientist who was putting up around these trees this mass spectrometers, quite sophisticated technology, which is going through the tubes
to the real-time, quite powerful computer machines and recording all data. So what they did, they recorded data all summer long from one growing season. So I got interested in what they are researching actually, and so I understood that these are these volatile emissions. This is the smell of the forest, and so which also very quickly goes into the atmosphere and also actually influence the local weather conditions as well because they participate in cloud creations. So when I started to research more about this topic, I found this publication and opinion by a scientist who was arguing that to save the planet, it's not about just planting the trees or even don't plant trees. And this was so, for me, so like kind of a radical opinion. So I was thinking, what's happening? And then I understood that actually some things could be really quite much more complex than we thought. And also, I kept working with these topics. I was interviewing the scientists in Switzerland with whom we were working together, and they just said yes, this is what they have been always focusing on measuring, maybe the soil level for a long time, trees also shrinking or growing trees. But what is happening in a more larger ecosystem, including the atmosphere and the relations? So this is, they say they don't know exactly because there are reasons for that. So because the trees are breathing and their emissions reach far out into the atmosphere, and if you really measure maybe even some big larger like raintree forests, they are quite sometimes maybe even locked. That's what scientists say. They can be even closed system because everything what they release during the nights, so they are also absorbing during the day, like the CO2. And so also the old carbon which is stored in the trees are released back into the atmosphere when the forests die or when the woods are burned. So this volatile issue for me was very interesting because because I was saying I was interested always in the invisible processes in the nature, trying to imagine how they look like and to find reliable data which could cover also all this my imagination. So this with the volatile emission, the problem is that they are very quickly transformed into the other um, organic compounds and also into the clouds. And scientists don't have so precise measurements, so how they could really research to find out which parts of the clouds or aerosols or pollution clouds even are coming from the natural sources and which are coming from the city, because they are coming all together. If you plant the trees in the cities, and they are very volatile, so they are kind of mixing together with the anthropogenic sources like a car pollution, for example. So that's what I understood, and I started to work not with one or another point, but I started to work more with this complexity. Because some scientists, if we can also find some scientific research where scientists are arguing that actually the smell of the forest, and as more stronger it is, it shows that we are on the safe side, that the climate can be put into balance. But then the other scientists are saying completely opposite, that their scientific research showed that actually these emissions in some places could make global warming worse. It's, for example, because in the northern climate, because I do also research in Iceland, I meet also this geologists there, and this how the ice is melting quickly. So that this is quite scary in the terms, because then this Earth's temperature is also depending, that sun is not anymore, all sun is not, all sun beams are not anymore reflected back, but by absorbed by theirs, because snow was reflecting, but when it will be covered, for example, with large areas of very dark, like pine, like some forests, nobody knows how to calculate if it will be better or it will be worse. So this predicting has become much more complex. And when I asked also for the scientists, because their thesis actually is that they suggest that if the more global, if the climate will become more warm, so then also we will have more fragrant forests. But for example, I got the data from the scientists because they said that they're giving me them because I don't reduce it, because I don't say it so in so simplistic and reduced way, because they understood that I will be working more with appreciating this complexity of this issue, which even scientists cannot really say how it all works and how it could be potentially modeled into the future also for the climate effect. So I thought that in parallel to data and creating immersive VR environments, I definitely also should go myself and get engaged with the sensing and experiencing what does that mean, because I never was really paying attention so much to like resin, but resin pressure is directly connected to volatile emissions. So, and this is also what the Swiss scientists were measuring and monitoring, and this is what I was also observing, and I did some experiments myself where I wanted to experience, because they say this is the same molecular formula. So this volatile emissions, which is mainly monoterpene. Yeah. So if I take this resin, so which is a hard consistency, and if I took the resin and I made a distillation, pouring here, cooking it and pouring cold water, I've got out the turpentine. And then I was cooking the part of the resin, and I've got out the chlorphonium. So basically, I wanted just to experience also all these transformations, how quickly they can actually change from one substance to another. So a little bit better to understand this complexity and why it's not so easy also to predict all the climate. So here are the data which I also visualized in my virtual reality visualization, and this is how I imagined these volatile emissions, how they relate. So with the resin pressure, with humidity of the air and humidity of the soil. So these are like main 4 parameters which I have been visualizing, which I will be showing also today a little bit later in 1 hour. Yeah, so kind of I like the idea that due climate change, at least we will have more fragrant forests. And I think that it's also quite important to talk about maybe climate literacy. Yeah, because which trees, because not all trees are emitting are volatile. So we should know which trees we plant in the cities, because that's for sure. But also all scientists agreed, whom I interviewed, we need trees because they for sure there is one effect. They are cooling the cities. Yeah, so that's obviously, and of course for biodiversity as well in the forests. Yeah, so yeah, that's my introduction into my current research, which I'm also now bringing to Northeast Europe, and will be continuing here. Okay, thank you, and
Thank you,
welcome to my
Raza.
presentation.
Thank you very much. I wrote down a couple of things, but I will come back to that when we have, in a couple of minutes, the panel with you. I would jump fast to our couple, Ina Conradi Chavez and Mark Chavez, who are presenting their work. They have been with the Beyond Festival for quite a while. They have been exhibiting here. And Ina Conradi, she is, since 2007 and until present, and the associate professor at the Nanyang Technology University in Singapore. So she was working with Vibeke there. Her digital paintings are animated and fit variable media spaces. Creatively employing digital paintings and 3D animations. She was exhibiting around the world, not only at the UCLA, at galleries in Brisbane, Sydney, Tokyo, at the ZKM here, and she got awards for her work, for instance, being the woman in 3D at Paramount Hollywood, and she was at SIGGRAPH, at a lot of film festivals, and she got an award, the Lumiere Award in 2018 from the Advanced Imaging Society and the VR Society Hollywood. Her recent work is exhibited at the NTU Museum Campus Art, the Art Trail Initiative. And there is a current work with one of our speakers from the afternoon, who's Thorsten Bauer, in the Elbphilharmonie in Hamburg, that she showed at Ars Electronica. And she is presenting with Marc Chavez, who is in the animation industry, an animation industry veteran, who worked majorly on 15 award-winning projects and also was a professor at the Nanyang Technology University. I hope you both are there. I get a thumbs up, and I'd say, yes, I hear you. Fantastic.
Yeah, we're here. Both of us are here.
Hi, I'm so sad I can't hug you, but I'm happy to see your faces.
We can, should we share the screen?
Yes, please.
If you want to go right
And
into
then
it.
you
I'll
have
just
your
go
time.
I'll just go right into it.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
And share the screen.
I didn't even say what you're presenting, but it will be about quantum logos, and I love quantum technologies. So let's see what you envisioned here.
Okay. Do you see our slide?
Yes, research and art sci introducing quantum logos.
Great. Yes, so I will present this with Mark, who's sitting right next to me here in Singapore. And thank you so much for having us again. Our research quantum logos Vision Serpent is an experimental immersive animated artwork exploring metaphysical naturalism with cultural design archetypes. All of our films that Mark and I did together build upon each other, and they try to gain new insights into the meaning and the nature of life. Our current work explores ideas behind counterintuitive concepts, and that are presented in myths, in archetype, in memory, and we focus them around quantum theory. Now, you mentioned Media Art Nexus. Yes, it's a platform that we jointly developed. And we work here with, this is only urban media screen in Singapore that presents only art. And we have jointly created and created a lot of art content with international universities. You mentioned Thorsten, yes, with Elbphilharmonie, with international and local artists. And Quantum Logos premiered at Ars Electronica Festival last fall, that in Deep Space. That's why we kind of missed ZKM. We set up collaborative called Quantum Travelers with one and only amazing Bianca Hoffmann. She's creative producer and science experience specialist in Bremen, Germany, with Robert Kastner, head of Candid Q in Vienna, Austria, and Dr. Robert Ersin, who is senior scientist at the Institute for Quantum Optics and Quantum Information in Vienna. And so after meeting them while doing an artist in residence at UCLA Art Science Center. So Mark was in LA, I was in Singapore, Bianca was in Bremen, and Bob in Vienna, and it was really tough. But I will pass it now to Mark to tell you a little bit more about quantum.
Yeah, so the challenges in this project was how can we convey difficult scientific concepts to a contemporary audience, specifically focusing on my ethnic background and people living in the Southwestern United States and Mexico. So I'm 50% indigenous American. And we wish to examine some of these and describe how we produced the solutions used in the artwork. Many philosophical questions arise in the context of our approach. And here's where we have to be particularly careful not to align with pseudoscience. This is what our colleague Bianca Hoffmann, our science communications expert, alerted to us. So it's the epistemological naturalism is the view that knowledge is best gained via science. Metaphysical naturalism is an ontological claim, like physicalism, that everything is natural, where some explication of natural is crucial. Non-naturalists view the naturalist as a physicalist under a different label. Both doctrines of thought have significant consequences for our perception of the world, especially human aspects of the world. A global metaphysical theory of this sort induces placement location problems located in a wholly physical world that seems not to be entirely physical or natural. Debates around these metaphysical doctrines often focus on the prospects for solving such placement problems where a failure may justify the elimination of the thing in question or a rejection of a global doctrine that might result in a physical world that is not physical or natural, but guided by faith and belief. So around questions around epistemological naturalism and metaphysical naturalism, debates around these metaphysical doctrines often focus on the prospects for solving such placement problems where the failure may justify an elimination of the thing in question or rejection of the global doctrine. Other debates focus on proper formulation and understanding of the doctrines, whether and how it might be justified, and its implications for science and the proper treatment of placement problems. Does physicalism require all sciences to reduce to physics? Yes, so these are some of the deeper questions this work looks at. So fractal chaos is difficult to predict, but it remains deterministic. What is remarkable about chaos is not that it's random, but that it's an entirely deterministic system that can produce seemingly random or unforeseen results. It's David Hirsch. So, you know, we're working with this fractal system where things are kind of moving and things are, you know, and they seem random and the whole thing. And you know, nowadays in computer graphics, you can actually develop visuals that simulate these natural things. So it was really fun because you know, as in this picture, you can see, you know, this mandala, I'll go into that later, and then these pools, looks like you're standing in water, but it's actually a designed illusion. So our goal was to develop a visual approach that can commonly be understood and that illuminates quantum theory. I've been researching Maya and Mexica thought and philosophy for several years now, including studying Nahuatl, one of the Mexican indigenous languages. I found opportunities to expand this research by using collective themes and ideas in design created intuitively by our ancestors to illustrate quantum theory. The project starts with the sound of a conch shell. So I blow the shell, and then a 10-minute animation, kind of pseudo interactive plays describing aspects of quantum theory with abstract animation. Afterwards, I invite the audience to enter the quantum world. The room transforms into a pool of quantum energy where the front screen and the floor transitions into an interactive state. Designed to resemble the depths of a sacred Maya cenote, the audience is immersed into a rippling fields of energy as part of an immersive narrative. The light acts as a metaphor for the pools, the kind of acoustics in the pools of water, reflecting my place within an ever rippling energy field, or the audience's place in an ever rippling. So in my approach, or in our approach, we wish to use the Mesoamerican notable mythic figures, in particular Xochipilli. Xochipilli was a figure whose devotees were devoted to pleasurable activities such as dance, song, music, love, and feasting. Robert Gordon Wasson says that in the statue's depiction, Xochipilli, this one on the lower left, Xochipilli is absorbed by Temichoch, or dream flowers. I may have said that wrong, sorry, for the Nahuatl speakers out there. As the Nahuatl say, describing the experience that follows the ingestion of an ethnogen, they would ingest the Temichoch, or dream flowers, to explore reality through the lens of the ethnogenetic experience. So this is a picture of black obsidian, Tezcatlipoca and the Black Mirror. It's a black obsidian or volcanic glass and was plundered by Cortez's people in Mexico in the 1530s. Mexica used it for divination. The Tudor mathematician and mystic John Dee, that's the center right above, and the apothecary, alchemist, and medium Sir Edward Kelly on the lower right. Were using, after they managed to get their hands on this, and they used it in the 16th century. They were kind of like an old school Watson and Holmes. It's based on, so what they did with it was they created these 16th century writings, and that they claimed that the information that it revealed was this particular language called the Enochian language, and it was delivered to them directly by angels. They were also said to have done magic with the Philosopher's Stone. John Dee actually coined the term the British Empire, petitioned the Queen to create a navy, and had one of the largest libraries in England at the time. So very educated, smart people, and they were, sitting around looking at this black obsidian and dreaming that angels were talking to them. And so these things have a lot of, kind of emotional impact for people who let their minds go. And they kind of float into these interesting places that are kind of culturally constructed around, things that are close to them. So the shadow field obsidian reflections can beguile all our minds, but careful comparisons between humanistic and scientific sources of information will always reveal a clearer picture. This is a picture from lintel 15 that is in the British Museum of the Mayans, taken from the Mayan site Yaxtlan, Mexico, late classic period. Lintel 15 of structure 12 depicts Lady Waktun, one of the wives of the king bird jaguar IV, during a bloodletting rite. The bloodletting rite conjures the vision serpent through induced hallucinations. The shadow field reflections, like I already said that, so what she would do was the women would induce, women and men, the high nobility would induce severe pain, and they would train themselves to see these visions out of this. They would take blood out of the wound that they caused themselves and burn it, and out of that they would see this vision serpent and see, it would talk to them and show them the meaning of life. And so those are very moving things. The fact that you can go so deep into these things and really, really believe in them, and your reality is constructed around these things. So in the vision smoke, the smoke would form into a snake with two heads, one for the underworld and one for the earth. As a result, an ancestor could travel through the snake and from the land of the dead to the land of the living. The snake itself is considered a representation of the Milky Way, the abode of the ancestors. So imagine that you see images of animals and faces. This is about pareidolia and apophenia. You hear indistinct voices with hidden messages and random noise, unmotivated seeing of connections accompanied by a specific feeling of abnormal meaningfulness. That's what these phenomena are. Described as the early stages of delusional thought as self-referential over-interpretations of actual sensory perceptions, as a human tendency to seek patterns and random information. The German term apophenia was coined by psychiatrist Klaus Conrad in his 1558 publication on the beginning stages of schizophrenia, defined as unmotivated seeing of connections accompanied by specific feeling of abnormal, meaningful, and thought as self-referential over-interpretations of actual sensory perceptions as opposed to hallucinations. Apophenia has come to imply a universal human tendency again to seek patterns in random information. Our artists use this propensity when creating their works to suggest ideas and concepts pertinent to their interests. Picasso created experiments in cubism to determine the emotive results of a shape and form. He extracted the essence of the Minotaur with lines and shapes. In our experimentation on the Emote project, we tracked brainwaves to determine the effect of images in music. Our question was, can we clearly measure the emotional impact of abstract animation on the viewer? We displayed the results of our work at MediaArtNext's 15 by 2 meter screen at NTU here in Singapore. Many physicists believe that entanglement is the essence of quantum weirdness, and somehow now suspect that it may also be the essence of space-time. Entanglement is the essential ingredient that knits space-time together into a smooth whole. Mark Van Ransel. So this slide shows how the double slit experiment produces two coherent sources of waves that interfere. Light spreads out, diffracts from each slit because the slits are narrow. These waves overlap and interfere constructively, bright lines and destructively dark regions. We can only see this if the light falls into the screen and is scattered into our eyes. Double slit interference pattern for water waves are nearly identical to that in light. Wave action is greatest in regions and of constructive interference and least in regions of destructive interference. Young's double slit experiment is presented as evidence that the presence of a human being can fundamentally change the behavior of matter at particle level. Regarding this behavior, the Copenhagen interpretation states that quantum systems don't possess definite properties prior to measurement, only probabilities that reduce certainties on measurement. Quantum physics is as difficult to understand now as it was for Einstein and scientists of his day. Since the early 20th century, artists have been creating artwork that explored questions posed by quantum physics, helping us in understanding the counterintuitive concepts of space, time, and the dissonance of the physical world. So rather than trying to stylistically represent the quantum world with visualized mathematics, we decided to leverage design construction explored by early civilizations, phenomena that they found wondrous. We looked into the spiral nature of organic form and other phenomena, ideas, images, and described by early men to find forms that suggest observations that our sophisticated instruments now allow us to see. As with the double slit experiment, when we take various waveforms with graphic systems, induce them to interfere with each other, interesting patterns emerge. So we were thinking maybe we could use these forms to describe quantum theory. We looked at other visualizations of nature made by early cultures and found that many shared common design with graphically represented math in contemporary quantum physics. When reading about the ideas represented by these forms, when reading about the ideas represented by these cultures and how many of them search for fundamental understanding of existence, we decided that this was a path through discovery we could take. For the artistic eye, what is notable about the patterns visualized in this area of mathematics is the graphical nature of the visualization and how they resemble mandalas. We looked at other visualizations of nature made by early cultures and found that many share the common traits with graphically represented math in contemporary physics. An interesting area of mathematics is called
Mark, I'm super afraid that I have to cut you or give you 1 minute to
Okay, we'll,
to wrap. It's really hard when you
yeah.
do it online. I can't go on stage and give you a silent note without interrupting you. I'm very sorry.
Okay, give me 2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, so some of this shares a lot of common visual intricacy with mathematics and quantum theory. Lie algebra is very interesting. This Albert Durer's celestial geometry is very interesting. And what in particular is interesting, how these patterns actually are, they're physical, and they actually represent, things that happen, like the path of Earth and Venus around the sun, create these interesting patterns. And these patterns are actually replicated in biology. And you can replicate these also here in this is Chladni's patterns on glass, or create these weird patterns. These patterns also look like patterns here of geometry of microtubes. And these, we're wondering if maybe there's a holographic field theory that would share some kind. So this is again where it gets a little bit out there. Quantum biology also has a lot of interesting things where these little red spheres display these chromospheres, where there's a quantum effect happens where energy passes from sphere to sphere, not as a water would flow, but as it just kind of reappears. This is a real thing that happens. And so, again, we got to watch out for this making it look a little bit too pseudoscience. And so, but here's a trailer for what we've come up with so far. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark and Ina. Well, for those of you who just zoom in or just be online now on YouTube, you see we're running out of time. It is an online symposium, so I can't be like normally, go on stage and just silently tell them that they only have 1 minute left and not interrupt them. So unfortunately now I had to interrupt a bit, not that diplomatically. Sorry for that, Mark. Because at least I want to have at least 1 minute for everybody who was part of this morning symposium. So we will have the art presentation at 11:35-ish, I believe. Ludka, 11, yeah, we'll see.
11:40.
Let's say 11:40.
Well, one thing is, I think we should start the panel discussion,
Yes.
and then we will have the art presentation. We will show a short clip from Victoria Vesna, the artwork of Ina and Mark, and then the artwork of Rasa Smite.
Fantastic.
So we can go now to the panel.
Okay. I will also get a thumbs up if we have questions from the audience on from our social media. But in the meantime, I wrote down a lot of things. Let's see. I believe that Vibeke and Steve, you are with us. Is everybody? Fantastic! Everybody is back. I don't see Ina and Mark yet, but it's cool to see all of you. So let's start with you, Vibeke, and And Steve, so what you have shown and what is on public TV in Indonesia, I mean, as you said, Steve, methane is a really big problem for the environment, much worse than CO2 is. And Mark Post showed that in 2014 when he was here at the Beyond Festival talking about cultivated stem cells and how the mass cow or cattle meat production is the biggest problem for our climate. Can you see yourself bringing that to other countries, or can you see that other TV shows would come to you? Should we reach out for you to the others? Do you have more research to do in Bali, or would you love to go somewhere else, maybe to Kenya?
Oh, thank you. Actually, methane's the second most important greenhouse. Sorry, second most important greenhouse gas after CO2 or nitrous
CO2 and
oxide.
methane.
A lot of it are agricultural sources. I need to say we're preparing this for Indonesian television. It hasn't happened yet because we've just finished the experiments. So trying to find a way to make the mathematics, the understanding of what we discovered, easily understandable and appreciated by the farmers in Indonesia. There's going to be a question as to what other regions of the planet it'll be possible, and that will depend upon more work by experimental research stations in places like the rest of Southeast Asia or China.
And Vibeke said, we now, after all these years of work, of artwork, but of research, you come to that point where you see you have to do something about it. This is now prepared for the TV. What are the next step in your work? Can you talk about that already? Is there some, some goal in the near future where you say, okay, next we build a permaculture farm?
Yeah, something like that, right. Yeah, I mean, because, yes, it's the actual involvement with the land, with the people. And so for me, it's actually more involvement with, for instance, in Borneo, where Steve is working to help save the forest and the indigenous people. So I see it more as working directly with the people and with the land. And that's why, I mean, rethinking the technology more from the standpoint of how does it fit in with those goals, you know, and Steve's research in particular has been very focused on real people and the real forest. And actually, you know, it's a good example, an incredible case study for understanding what's happened to the rest of the planet and the disappearance of species. Anyway, your question was what's coming. And the immediate future is to do everything we can to help the people. And so that's really it, the people in the forest.
That actually leads me to Liz. Liz, you are already doing a lot. Just when you talked about what you're doing with the kids at the school and how you're planting trees so that they have a green schoolyard, and you want to bring that to all schools in Kenya. I mean, you, as I said, you are already the example or lead by example. You saw all the other artworks. Do you think that also you could integrate that in the school curriculum or talk to the schools to include things like that? Is that something that inspires you?
Yes, definitely. And I think the most important thing is that the schools are very much open to all the ideas and there is no pushbacks. I mean, when you just go to the school and approach them and tell them about how impactful the project is and just tell them how it's going to help the children, the schools, and also transform the future of the school, then they're definitely always welcoming to any new ideas. And I think that is the most important thing when it comes to just starting up these projects here in Kenya. It's very easy to just approach these schools and they are welcoming to the ideas as long as the ideas are going to help the children and help the school as well, because these schools also have these challenges, and the fact that the project is helping act as a solution to the challenges, then the pushbacks, I don't think it's something that will be seen. So they're welcoming to the ideas, and it's definitely something that can be applied into these projects, because the whole idea that probably I didn't mention is to incorporate all the sustainable development goals into this whole, the curriculum. As much as we're training them, we also try to make sure that these projects also incorporate these sustainable development goals, because we need to enlighten them. And at the same time, we need to have a sustainable future. So how can we use the schools, the institutions, the young people, the children, to make sure that all these things are in them, in their future, and also in the institutions that they are in right now.
Raza showed that there are scientists who believe that it might be even worse for the environment to plant more trees because of some emissions, but still a lot of enough scientists say no, we need trees. But I believe also, because I I said the word permaculture, I believe it has to be planting trees in guilds and planting them together so that they can fertilize each other. Are you educating the kids also on that, or are they just getting one tree, they adopt one tree and then they nurture it with water, and then like, I don't know, miraculously everything will be planted? Is there a education around where trees should be planted and with what?
Yes, definitely. We educate them. And maybe even before we get to the schools, we do a background check. Number one, to see if the school is in need of the trees. And number two, to also see the soil and the region where the school is located, so as to know the most suitable tree species that can do well in that particular area. And also another thing that I didn't mention is that the green school model that we are trying to do through greening schools also incorporates many other issues that also include kitchen gardens, and also like how they can make use of waste to grow their own food in their compounds. For example, how they can grow vegetables inside a huge sack, and also how they can be able to just mix up different tree species in their school compound to, number one, also enrich their soil, and also just help in many aspects like windbreakers, or it all depends on the challenge that we identify in the school. If it's a problem to do with distractions from the outside, or if it's a problem to do with the soil, or if it's a problem to do with just making sure that the kids have some shade, then that's how we determine the type of trees that we plant in that particular school compound. And maybe I would mention something that I also recently published on my social platforms, that growing trees is a good idea, but stopping deforestation is even a better
Yes.
idea. So all these solutions are, I would say, are equally important. And as much as we are promoting the tree growing culture, we also are encouraging the aspect of halting deforestation, because if deforestation is still going on in all these aspects, and on the other hand, we are growing trees, then I don't think we are making a huge difference. So we need at the same time to halt deforestation and make sure that we're stopping all forms of deforestation, including companies or institutions that are funding deforestation or contributing to it as well. So that is why we are incorporating all these things in the same aspect. And one thing that we also do in the trees that we grow is that we are encouraging them to grow indigenous tree seedlings, to also connect them back to nature too, because all these indigenous tree seedlings have values, and most of the values we learn them from our traditional ways of living, and we know the value that comes with the trees. And so as they plant these indigenous trees, they are also getting to connect to the environment and to learn the value of each particular tree, because each tree has got the value that
Fantastic.
comes with it. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
all.
and yeah, as I said, it's inspiring for me to see what you are doing, what the kids are doing there with you, and that they really learn from nature. I think my mic is off. Oh, now it's coming back. Raza, you showed work in the Swiss Alps, and that there we can already see it, the trees, the massive droughts that Europe was facing lately. But I mean, droughts are everywhere. Just look at the latest fire we had in Australia, which was devastating as hell. Raza, you I'm not quite sure if I understood correctly what you did with the distillation of substances from the tree. It looked to me a bit like mushrooms on the tree, but I'm not sure. Maybe I totally misunderstood that. Could you shortly say again what was? I only understood that it is hard to predict the climate change when you look at the results of the distillation. Oh no, sound, hang on, we don't hear you yet.
Yeah.
Yes.
This more, so this what I did with the resin, this was only for more like individual experience, what means these volatile emissions and how they relate to resin, and what is this smell in the forest, pine tree forest, which we experience. Because we can talk about volatile emissions, we don't see what it is. The other approach which I do and because my installation is now since yesterday open in Critical Zones exhibition as a physical installation, 2-channel video. But the other part of it is, so there also you can see these artifacts of what I did, turpentine and resin. And also interviews with these scientists. But my main artwork is the visualization of data. So what I did, so these are, I scanned the Finwald environment. So this is a structure like of the forest. And I visualized the like a 5 months data, which will continuously receive from like the process, what was happening in the forest.
Got it.
And sometimes it just, from this you can see that it's really getting, also by colors, it's getting much more dry, much more colorful at some periods. And if I would continue to do it next year, so then we could see probably also we could compare even scientific.
It sounds for me a bit like the next step after what Wiebeke showed a couple of years ago with the installation that was also part of her presentation, where she showed how the water in plants flows, how it's and we could also hear it. I have, my goodness, we're running definitely out of time. I have one question for each of you and I got inspired by yesterday's symposium where the moderator asked each of the panelists what gives you hope. And I kind of guessed the answer of Liz, but I want to hear it anyways, and I want to hear it first from Ina and Mark. What gives you hope because in the afternoon we talk about the new narrative of the 21st century. So what gives you hope for the 21st century?
Well, I mean, what I'm thinking is that, I'm American, so it's kind of awkward asking about hope when we've got such a bad situation over there in the United States. So I'm hoping definitely that situation changes, and more people wake up to the power of the oligarch and how the influence of old big money has on our life. That seems to be the problem we're all complaining about. Many of the artists on this panel mentioned that corporate interests are consuming everything around you, and you're trying to record what's left, and it's really difficult. It's a kind of a race.
Yeah, same. I share the same.
Yeah. So I mean,
You still have a house in Los Angeles, right?
We're still in Los Angeles.
Our son is there. He did the music for the piece, so it was really familiar to hear the Quantum Travelers and Quantum Moguls.
Yeah.
We were really happy. It's really, that's what gives me hope, to see us as a family coming together, even though we are so far apart.
Got it. Raza, what gives you hope for the 21st century?
Projects like an activism which was presented in this panel, because this shows that how important actually are all aesthetics, poetics, and also all artistic expressions, particularly they can be used really like as a tools in the research as well. So together with the scientific. So I'm for your suggestion. You said STEM should become a STEAM. So art should join those other technical and mathematical disciplines. And also this is what I've got also as a reflection to my work from the scientists with whom I work together. So they were really saying that this should happen together, because otherwise they lose often this holistic view of the things. And I think if we activate in such many levels and so differently, so and using also sound, yeah, your project is, Rebecca, really amazing. So I really liked it. Because then, and also when they saw how I visualize the trees, they said it looks the same forest. They know from the heart. They go there often, and it looks so different. Yeah. So they say that there is a potential that artists and activists, yes, they can also say and communicate most recent, like even scientific discoveries. Because I'm a little bit for climate literacy. So, and I think we're getting there, so that we start to understand that there are a certain level of things which probably are a bit different than we were thinking, and it's a bit more complex, but we can solve it together with multiple perspectives.
Thank you. Vibeke and Steve, one sentence.
Ironically, a crisis can be a trigger for something better. Mark and Nina mentioned COVID, as you did. And with everything that stopped, the fact that animals came back into the streets, that you could smell some of the trees that might be not be giving so much aroma otherwise, all of that, I think, gave me hope for what happens if everybody starts thinking about it. People want, and so that's one thing, the young people, of course. Unfortunately, the crisis itself, which is terrible, but at the same time, I think people now, partly through media, are becoming very, very aware of it. And pretty much that's it. And the activists like you, and people with great heart and conscience.
Events like this conference give me hope.
Yay! Me too. Liz, the last words to you, our our youngest panelist, and the one that I believe everybody gives us hope. I believe it's the kids that give you hope, but what else?
Thank you so much. So I always envision a world that's livable, and a world where we will all put nature before everything else, and a world where we will put people and the planet before profit, and a world where the future generations will not have to suffer the consequences of previous generations. And despite everything that is going on right now, with all the devastating challenges facing our environment that gives us this fear for the unknown type of future that we might have, what gives me hope is the existing unity behind the young climate activism right now, because the young people have taken lead and have stepped up to the challenge to demand for a livable world and a safe future for everyone. And the fact that we are not giving up gives me more hope that we will definitely achieve this kind of world that I have always envisioned.
Thank you. I believe yesterday, Seda Röger said humankind is the biggest threat to nature, but also the biggest hope. And thank you, Raza, for pointing that out, what I said at the beginning. STEM should become STEAM. But maybe you see that this is just a dedication and saying yesterday, no, the day before, Holger Volland was here. These are from your Arts Plus. Culture has no race and no gender, and culture, and I'd say art, reaches where politics never reach. And by that, I thank my panelists, and I hope I see logos. Thank you so much for listening. At 1 p.m. we are back with the new narratives for the 21st century, and I'm honored to have one of the Fraunhofer directors with us. One of the only females they have, 1 out of 4, and this is 75 institutes, so 71 male. Anyways, we will talk about that later and about a new narrative, and I will give the mic over to Ludger about the art presentations, and I see you back at 1 p.m.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you to all the panelists. We have 3 parts to show in this art presentation. The first thing is by Victoria Vesna. She sent us a clip, and in this clip she will introduce an artwork, an art-guided meditation, which we will do together at 9 p.m. in the film festival. So this is Victoria Vesna from LA. Do we have some
Hello,
sound?
everybody, wherever you are, beyond, and especially a big hello to Ludger. Thank you for this opportunity to quickly show a little bit about this project that was initially developed by for the Museum of Natural History in Vienna at the invitation of Dr. Christian Kovarov. It's still there, but very few people see it, and I have developed a new version of it online, which we will perform for you tonight, 9 p.m. German time. It's all about dust, dust that comes from many different places around the world. Here you see us searching for dust at the Museum of Natural History in Vienna on the roof, and guess what we found? We have hair, textile fibers, lichen, all kinds of things we see when we look under the microscope. Saharan dust mixed with other types of pollution that also would require some looking through to figure out what it even is. Here, that little red dot is actually a microplastic, glass, again, lichen, all kinds of pollutants from all over the place. And possibly there may be some dust particles from other solar systems and from Mars, from all over. So this layering became very interesting and important to me for the installation I was doing at the Museum of Natural History. And I was looking also to include sound. Here you can see the radar station from France looking for signals for meteorites, and it actually is being shown in real time at the museum. And after spending a month on site developing the installation, I opened the show on March 10th. Many people came, friends, and it was just wonderful. But already the COVID was rearing its head, and the very next day, the museum closed. I'll show you a little bit about the installation. I'll just forward it a little bit. But that's reflected. So the piece became more and more about things breaking apart, and I took, with the help of the people at the museum, 7 meteorites that crash in space. The dust falls and the pollution comes up and it all mixes. This meditation became an online work that I'm developing with this group here. John Brumley, who developed a program with the COVID data real time coming from the Johns Hopkins University. Clinton and Ivana, who did the sound and visual mixing and also some composing. Paul Geluso, who developed the drone sounds. He works with surround sound, and we're experimenting with that. We've been working together for quite a while. And the newcomer, Rihanna Catalyst, whose voice is added to the kind of celestial movements. So to give you a little taste, here's the COVID data that's at the bottom of the layering. here's the drone sounds. Meant to neutralize the anxiety. And then we have the voice from Rihanna. Sorry. She leads you through the celestial. And finally, we have the space data, NASA and SOHO and ESA. This was actually repurposed. And so dust knows no borders. That's the big message. And if you are able to, do join us and keep an eye on the dust around you, because one of them may be from outer space. Thank you again, and I hope next time we meet in person. Bye.
Yeah. So I need a second. Victoria Vesna will present this work in a live meditation tonight at 9 p.m. in the film festival. It's on the same frequency on our social websites or on our website. Now I will show the work Quantum Logos, Serpent Vision by Mark Chavez and Ina Conradi, one of our dream teams. And our other dream team, Steve Lansing and Vibeke Sørensen, we will show today in the evening at 3 o'clock, 3 works of them, some also some collaborations. Now, Mark and Ina have already explained the very complex thinking and research behind this work, and now we can watch it. Quantum Logos. Okay, the last artwork we see now before we have a lunch break is from Rasa Smite, Atmospheric Forest. She already had explained in the panel the thinking and the research about this work. And this is a premiere. Another version of this art and this research is now in an analog modus here at the exhibition at ZKM, which opened yesterday, Critical Zone, curated by Peter Weibel and Bruno Latour. And what is, for me, one of the really incredible thing with this artwork we will see now, it's not that it's just it has an incredible aesthetics of data, but also I never saw smells. So enjoy with me Atmospheric Forest by Rasa Smite and Writer Smith.